So, look, really want to say thanks very much, Helen, for the opportunity just to gate crash. I don't want to take up too much of the time. I've seen a little bit of the snippet of what Jan's got to talk about. So brace yourselves. I think you're in for a great ride. I'm sure it's going to be lots of fun, and I wish you a great lunch and learn.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Jay.
Bye.
All right. Well, I'll just introduce Jan to everybody, and quite a few of you on this call know Jan and have been part of her trainings as well. So Jan is the education consultant for Training Central, and she's the founder of Get Smart Services and Get Smart Learning Academy, which I love the names. She spent 15 years working in the franchise sector, senior management roles, and then in 2011 founded Get Smart Services. In 2020, she completed a 7-year empirical research study that developed an evidence-based model for success in franchising and became the catalyst for her best-selling book, which you can see behind Jan, The Ultimate Franchising Success Formula. And I'm very excited that we're going to get a snippet of what's in that book today. So over to you, Jan.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah, look, I've been really lucky that over the last 25 years or so, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different franchise brands. And something that we all seem to agree on is that franchising can be very challenging indeed. You can't just tell franchisees what to do and expect them to do it. But we introduce awesome initiatives that are going to help them thrive and grow, and many just don't seem to get it. They resist change. They keep doing what they've always done. So there's times when I felt literally like pulling out my hair when we didn't always get the enthusiastic buy-in and engagement, and more importantly, action from some of the truly great initiatives that we were trying to introduce. And amazingly, the most successful franchisees seem to always be the first to embrace new initiatives. And it's the ones that seem to need it the most, that are struggling, that don't engage. So why is that? You know, that it just became just sort of a really irritating question. Because the simple fact is that if we can't get franchisee buy-in and engagement and action from the programs and initiatives that we want to implement, it's going to slow us down. It's going to hold back success. So eventually this became so frustrated. I sometimes call it an itch that just had to be scratched. And that was sort of what started me off on this research journey to, to try and find some answers. I've just got a little chat question there for you. If you wouldn't mind just popping into chat, rating your satisfaction with the degree of buy-in and engagement and action that you get with your programs and initiatives. Just rate yourself on a 1 to 10, because I'll be sort of interested to see if we could share that information. I think to give the success formula the credit that it deserves, I need to spend a minute or two just explaining the research process. It started with a research question, which was what factors prevent franchisee buy-in, engagement and action with franchisor programs and initiatives. I think I pretty much set that up in the last slide. So that was the research question. It took 7 years before we came up with the with the model that I guess gives some of those answers. But the first stage involves studying literally hundreds of empirical research studies on the complex topic of success in franchising. And then from that kind of revealed some common issues that potentially could impact franchisee buy-in, but that had to be tested. So that was then tested out in the real world, and that involved 257 interviews with a lot of different people, different franchising roles, franchisees, franchisors, suppliers, a couple of organizational psychologists that specialize in franchising, a wide range of people, many different franchise brands. And what came from that was that sort of narrowed it all down, and we got a model from that was then tested in 6 in-depth case studies. So as I say, all of that took 7 years. It went through a rigorous peer review process. I was supervising professors in 3 different universities, 1 in the US and 2 here in Australia. And the research is actually held in really high regard in academic circles. So there are 3 published academic journals and a chapter in an academic book. And I actually got invited to present on 3 consecutive years at the International Society of Franchising to present on findings from the research, which was fantastic because the first was Atlanta, Georgia, the next one was in Quito in Ecuador, and the third one was in Vienna. So I got to see some places that I hadn't previously visited in the world. So that was that was a bit of a bonus. But the results of all of that was a really powerful model for success in franchising that I wish I had known about when I started out my franchising career 25 years ago. So I decided this was too good to just remain buried in academia land. So that's why I wrote the book. That's why I developed the e-learning and coaching program, because I just want to get this model for success out there, because it just makes things so much easier. If you've got a formula to follow, you've got a model to follow. So that was the research.
Jan,
yeah.
Jan, I'll just quickly jump in. Very, very interesting so far. You've got a 6, a 7 and 2 8s out of 10.
Excellent. So we've got reasonable engagement, but no 10s. So we're all struggling to a certain extent with that. Fantastic. Thank you. So what I want to cover here are the 12 silent killers of franchising, which are what I call the common issues that I just spoke about, the common issues that prevent buy-in and engagement and action that tend to lurk around to some extent or another in most franchise systems. They will then look at the 5 success formula elements that, if you like, are the antidote to those silent killers. And the real difference between the very successful franchise groups involved in the study and the less successful or those in the lower performing range was their ability to identify and control and to some extent prevent those silent killers from holding back success and causing harm. So the model is actually what they did to do that, if that if that makes sense, how they were able to do that. And then finally we'll look at setting priorities to help you get going and get your economic engine cogs turning. And then finally, I'll just briefly share with you that you can earn CFE points by putting the success formula into action. So those of you that are involved in the CFE program might want to consider that. Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, I'm sure a lot of people have read that. He found that the great organizations, they founded their business strategy and decision-making on 3 concepts. And that was, first of all, what they could be best in the world at, what drives their economic engine, and what they can be deeply passionate about. And in franchising, I just so firmly believe that our number 1 critical success factor, what we can be passionate about, what drives our economic engine, is our ability to develop and replicate thriving, wealthy, successful franchisees. That's what franchising is all about. That's what we can become passionate about. That's what drives our economic engine. And that should be the unifying vision of every single member of the franchisor team, and the litmus test or a navigational beacon for the strategic decisions that we make. So I've just got a bit of a chat activity going on now as I go through the silent killers. So there's 12 silent killers that I'm going to explain to you. If any of those resonate in any way, you think that you might have experienced them, you just put silent killer number 3 or whatever in chat, so that we can sort of see how things are panning out. Silent killer number 1 is having a weak or wrong unifying vision. So examples of that might be things like, we want to expand into new regions, or we want to expand overseas, or we want to become more corporate, or shareholder return on investment, or founder wealth. Those are all good goals, but they're not what should be a unifying vision. Blockbuster were a huge brand back in the 1990s. I'm sure many of us remember them. In as early as 1991, they actually identified the need to invest in new technology to future-proof their business. And instead of doing that, the CEO at the time sold out, took his bucks and left it to flounder. And of course, we all know that they went bankrupt in 2012. So, that's an example of not a bad unifying vision that, that led to, in the end, to bankruptcy in that particular case. So royalties and franchise fees are all things that drive our economic engine, sometimes supplies and real estate as well. So the franchisor's success depends completely on the success of the franchisee. If we look at number 2, I'm saying there no appetite for crude oil exploration and refinement. So economic engines need fuel. So if you think of crude oil or raw fuel as that is the tacit knowledge or raw knowledge that exists within franchise groups and within the franchising sector as a whole. And our skills, the skills and the ideas and the experiences of top performers are valuable. It's valuable crude oil that we want to capture, because that's kind of the key to replication. If we can replicate the successful things that our successful franchisees do, and they're not all doing exactly the same thing as each other all the time, but if we can kind of amalgamate that, then that's the gives us the key to replication. And the good news is that knowledge, unlike crude oil, is in abundant supply, and we can capture it. Is the challenge is that to be able to capture it. So number 3, franchisor expertise holds back knowledge creation. Sometimes we sort of think, oh, there's no need to explore. We know what we've got to do. Sometimes because we're in a hurry to implement, or we're worried that things will slow down, and we rely on the 2 T's, which is telling and training. And even if it's true that you don't need any more input or any more knowledge, you do need buy-in. You need buy-in for initiatives to succeed. So you're more likely to get buy-in if franchisees feel that they're being listened to, they feel that their know-how is being valued, and that they trust that the franchisor is going to get it right. So to avoid number 3, we just need to make sure that we seek out the knowledge that exists, whether we believe we need it or not. Number 4 is what I'm calling randomly eating the elephant without engaging and turning the engine cogs. That sounds a bit complicated, but so many things to do. Sometimes we feel like we've got so many things to do that we get overwhelmed. So we need a big picture plan that's guided by our unifying vision, and then we need to basically take it off in bite-sized chunks. So we need to be very, very kind of mindful of doing that, and not jumping from one thing to another all the time, and not actually realizing it's better to do one thing or 2 things and implement them really well than to sort of have all of these things going on and diluting it. So what we're trying to do there is build momentum. So
I think we all resonate with that one, Jan. I like it, and so does Greg Nathan.
Yeah. So it's about building momentum, moving forward, no reverse gear. We can't go backwards. Persistent cranking and fueling and maintenance and tuning, so that we pick up pace. Number 5 there, lacking the discipline to follow systems. That's or the systems maybe just not being robust enough, or not existing. So we need to cultivate a culture of discipline with very strong, consistent systems that go beyond just the operations manual. Franchise groups have systems for driving franchisee performance, systems for managing communication flows, for automating marketing, for managing sales. The list goes on. Developing systems is a core competency of franchising. Systems is what we do in franchising, right? So that's something we need to be mindful of. Then we go on to number 6, not understanding the unique interdependent nature of franchising. That you sometimes see somebody comes into a role in franchising, they've been very, very successful out in the corporate world, they've had brilliant careers, but then they flounder because they get disillusioned by franchisee disengagement, and really it can be quite a steep learning curve. I remember my own learning curve when I started out in franchising 25 years ago. Just like, why aren't they just doing this? No, it's good for them. Why aren't they doing it? But basically, command and control methods that can work in the corporate world don't work in franchising, because no matter how good a strategy is, if you don't get the buy-in, then it's not going to succeed. So it's easily avoided. Number 6 is easily avoided as long as it's recognised and addressed. And so, you know, we need to be sure that we understand that interdependent nature that is franchising. Number 7 is the harmful gravitational conditions. Now, we really need communication for franchising relationships. It's absolutely vital. And so it's the means to achieving that interdependency and mutual supportiveness and mutual benefit. But we need healthy gravitational conditions for effective communication. So when I talk about gravitational conditions are what holds the franchise network together. So healthy conditions need to be present for effective communication, and conditions that harm, because we're talking about the silent killers here. So conditions that that are harmful are things like a culture that lacks embedded trust and mutual supportiveness, or lack of collaboration and relationship commitment, or a culture that's not conducive to learning. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to be mindful of, because negative conditions can create a sick culture, which becomes a bit of a cancer that destroys trust, kills collaboration and mutual supportiveness. It inhibits knowledge sharing, and it stifles potential, and it leads to communication failure at the end of the day. So, you know, that's something we need to be careful of. Number 8, lack of rigor about only having bright stars on board. Again, going back to Jim Collins, you know, one of his in Good to Great, get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. Very much behind this. So if number 5 was all about lacking the discipline to follow systems, we need to make sure that we're very good at following the system to make sure that we have the right people involved. Successful franchisors tend to be very rigorous about that, whereas the emerging or less successful, you know, tended to sort of take anybody with the wallet and the heartbeat, as was often quoted to me, and that always comes back and bites on the bum. So, and needing to make sure that we only allow bright shining stars into the system and applying rigor to achieve that. And that is not just franchisees, it's actually, if the franchisees have teams, it's their team members, it's the members of the franchisor team. We need to make sure that we've got the right supplier partners. So it applies to everybody that is actually involved in our network. Number 9, quick fix financial performance gains that at the expense of long-term strategy. Need to be really careful of that. It's often a result of randomly eating the elephant, you know, not following that rigorous selection process, or potentially using relationship restructures to improve shareholder return on investment, you know, layoffs and restructuring. And the blockbuster sellout as a classic example. We talked about that before. If they'd have decided to invest in future-proofing their business and back when it was recognized, they could have been the next Netflix instead of being put out of business by them. So, and as you can see, many of these silent killers are interrelated. So we look at number 10, we talked about avoiding the unifying, talked about making sure we've got the right unifying vision. Number 10 is saying that we need to make sure that we also apply that litmus test or navigation beacon to the strategic decisions that we make. Some examples of that not happening, a bit of a classic is rewarding the sale of franchise territories. So whoever's responsible for franchise sales gets rewarded for the sale of a territory. Would it not be better if they were rewarded for new franchisee performance results over their first year or their first 2 years or something like that? Because that's actually rewarding what we need to see, not just here's another territory. Axing initiatives for short-term gain can be another one there. Cutting back on field support, offboarding high caliber people and replacing them with less experienced lower caliber people to again to cut back on costs. You know, they just making sure that we apply that unifying vision litmus test to these strategic decisions. Number 11 is resting on the laurels of the past, or sometimes imaginary laurels. You know, we think we're still so great. Blockbuster most certainly did that. And this one sometimes affects franchisees. You know, they resist change, they resist initiatives to future-proof the business. And so we need to make sure we engage in strategies to prevent that happening and causing harm. And then the final one, great initiatives poorly implemented. Well, that's a bit of a catch-all. And it probably comes about because the previous 11 silent killers are impacting the implementation of things. But 12 was a nice number to end on rather than 11. So we've got that one in as well. So that explains the silent killer. So what's the antidote for the silent killers? This evidence-based model for success in franchising, and it's based on the factors that the world's most successful franchise systems actually apply. Now, this is real life research. It's not just something that somebody has dreamed up. So the 5 essential elements: number 1, get the right people on board and replicate them. So element 1 of the book, each element of the book is probably 6 to 8 chapters off the top of my head. So there's a lot of information. It's a real how-to book. And the e-learning and coaching programs follows the same pattern. So it's really about how we do it. So we step through how to identify the attributes of the most successful franchisees that you have in your system. And if you manage to identify those, it actually unlocks that key to replication. So we build star behavior profiles, and we do that not only for franchisees, but also for the various roles in the franchisor team. And you know, if there are team members in the franchise business, then for those team members as well. So they're very useful tools that can then be created from this, and that is tools for selection, of course, but also tools for performance coaching, which helps us then with field support. And the next one is discovering, refining, and transferring know-how. So we talked about that need for having an appetite for collecting know-how. Our knowledge is the only true competitive advantage that we have as a franchisor, and it's the fuel that drives our economic engine. So the capacity of the franchisor to actually gather and refine the knowledge that exists, and then the ability of the franchisee to learn and turn that into action is critical for sustainability and for competitive advantage. So, and basically know-how or knowledge, that's what we sell in franchising, right? That's the system. Business format franchising is all about this system of knowledge. So so that one's really critical. Number 3 is developing a healthy culture and effective communication. I talked a bit about that when we did the silent killers from the opposite way, but the optimal cultural conditions are to have an organic kind of relational structure that facilitates collaboration and cooperation, to have a culture that is supported with embedded trust and learning orientation and cooperation and collaboration, and to understand and accept the interdependent nature of franchising, and also that insatiable appetite for discovering and refining and transferring knowledge so that we can fuel success. So you can see again, they're somewhat interrelated. Number 4 is about the whole field support. You know, the most frequent thing that franchisees complained about was poor support, lack of support, or reduction in support. We don't get what we used to get. Whereas franchisors from the same system said, our support's fantastic. We do so much for them. So, you know, how can there be two sort of opposite views there that from the same system? So is the issue actually lack of support, or is it unrealistic expectations? And so in element 4, we work through how to answer that, you know, how to just uncover that and set the right expectations, but also implement and build and implement a structured support system to mentor, coach, and support our franchisees. But it's not a one size fits all. So I've got to be careful when I say we build a structured system. It also needs to be adaptable to where each franchisee is in their life cycle, their experience levels, and so on. So it's not a one size fits all. And then finally, achieving learning, action, and lasting behaviour change. I'm going to give you some stats here. 40% of training fails to transfer to on-the-job behaviour. A further 70% have faltered within 12 months. And only 50% of investment in training results in business improvement. So we need a paradigm shift here. Forget training. Training doesn't work. What we need is learning and lasting behaviour change. And so element 5 works through how you can achieve that. And it's, again, you know, sort of about 8 chapters jam-packed with how to methods for actually going about achieving that. Setting priorities that will get your engine cogs turning faster and faster is the next next step there to building momentum, making it happen. You know, I often get asked which is the most important element, and that's an impossible one to answer because they're all equally important. But each franchisor has their own unique priorities. They have their own resource constraints. They have their own challenges. So what we need to do is first of all, we gain that understanding of the big picture, which I've gone through very quickly here, but then it's setting priorities to get started. And with every little crank of the engine, we just get things moving. It's hard at first, and then we just build momentum and things move faster and faster, and you know, we keep going. But I have to say, the job's never finished. It's never done. Oh, I've implemented the success formula. That's it now. Great, done. No, you're forever working on it. It's a, you know, it's a lifelong quest. The 5 elements work together, and it's a continuous improvement plan for life. Is probably the best way to describe it. How to eat an elephant. We talked about eating the elephant a bite at a time. You know, that's we all know that one. But celebrate activity that's completed rather than waiting for the outcome. And the 5 elements are presented separately, but they're interconnected. There's no room for silos in franchising. So what we need is cross-functional teams and potentially working on several elements concurrently. But we also got to be very mindful of not biting off more of the elephant than we can chew at any one time. As I mentioned earlier, better to be implementing a couple of initiatives really well than diluting ourselves too much. So how we can help with this and help getting those priorities going. There is a learning activities kit. It's not overly daunting. There's in it there is a quiz and a results report, and then there's some reflection activities, a little bit of a digging deeper exercise, but nothing that would probably take you more than half an hour to actually go, but get a little bit of a gauge for where you sit with the success formula within your franchise business as it stands at the moment. And then you can book a virtual coffee catch up with me to have a chat about it if you like. I've got a lot of free tools and templates and things like that that I can help if I know what you need to help you get started. So you can access where you can get your kit from. If you just give me your email address and name and whatnot, then that'll automatically come out to you via email straight away.
We have a question, Jan.
Yes.
If training doesn't work, what's an example of learning that works well?
Okay, so the difference between training and learning is training is what I give. As a trainer, I'm presenting to you. That's what I'm doing now. Learning is what you've taken from this. So if you actually take from this session and you've learned something, and look, there's a lot of information to take in only half an hour, but if you've actually learned something from it, but then you take that and you go and get the learning activity kit and you decide that you're going to start and put that into, and start taking some action, even if that's just baby steps, that's an example of learning that works well. So yeah, it's all about learning and behavior change and action, I suppose, rather than just let's tick the box and say that we've trained these new franchisees when they've come in, that's job done now. Let's move on. Okay, so I just wanted to talk finally about the Certified Franchise Executive or CFE accreditation program, because it's really exciting that this has sort of going through a bit of a relaunch, would you say, Helen? Anyway, it's getting a lot of attention at the moment, which is fantastic. And it really is what I'd call top tier educational benchmarks that demonstrate commitment to professional development for people in the franchising sector, and demonstrates commitment to leadership in franchising. And it's way more than just a certification. It's actually a symbol. In my, you know, I've never seen so many people who've achieved CFE. They put it on their profiles. They put it after their name. It's something that people are really proud of and really means something in franchising, because it's a symbol of mastering franchise operations and leadership and growth strategies, I guess. So I will say I have put a chat question there. If anybody's involved or interested in becoming involved in that or finding out more about it, that'll be something that Helen and her team would take up. But, you know, certainly if it piques some interest, then do. Maybe some of you are already involved in that. You do get CFE points for attending here today. You'll actually get extra points if you do the learning activity. You'll get some bonus points, and I'll be letting Helen and the team know who actually does that.
Nice one.
So because it's about, to me, it's about action. You know, action is what we want. But yeah, the Franchising Success Formula e-learning and coaching masterclass is an accredited program, and you can earn 1,470 CFE points as you work on your own unique priorities at your own pace, working through the program. Or you can tackle the program in 6 separate programs as well, if the whole thing is not what you want. So there's information on that on the FCA website under Training Central as well. So yeah, so just wanted to mention that.
Oh, good. What questions have we got?
I've got a comment.
Yeah.
I just think what you did, Jan, is just incredible. The challenge is you've got so much to offer, so much insight. I think we might all be a bit overwhelmed as why we're not getting any questions. Can I come back to that learning thing again? Because franchisors are constantly meeting with franchisees, either in small groups or large groups. Do you have any practical tips when you get a group of franchisees together? The temptation is, the easy way is to put some slides up and just talk at them for half an hour, but it's harder to engage them. So do you have any tips on what you do or what works for you when you get franchisees together, or what you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I do is again learn from people who do it really well. So I'm not claiming credit here. You know, the research gave me exposure to lots and lots of different things that people do, and one of them that I loved was knowledge sharing moments. Now, Safety have been doing safety shares or safety sharing moments in their meetings or toolbox talks or whatever they're called for donkey's years. But knowledge sharing moments, there is a couple of franchise groups that did this. Only one of them called them knowledge sharing moments, so you know, different terminology. But basically, has anybody got a knowledge sharing moment to share with us? Oh, well, I went to this lunch and learn, and I heard about this success formula, and you know, and so you're putting a little bit in, then the opportunity to ask questions about it, so that tacit knowledge then starts to become implicit. And then if somebody will take responsibility for actually capturing that and putting it into a form that can be shared, if it's something that is worthwhile taking up and doing, if it's something that is worth putting into your franchise knowledge bank or operations manual, whatever your terminology is, then that turns it into explicit knowledge that can be shared. So I love that, you know, that as a start to every single meeting, and it gets interaction happening. It's like, okay, we can get into, if you've got a big meeting, get into groups of 3 or 4, have a knowledge sharing moment, and then tell us what you know, do a group scoop, to use Greg's terminology of what the knowledge sharing moments were.
Excellent. Yep. And Claire Wilson from the Alternative Board has a question.
Yeah, we're actually, this is really interesting, actually very timely. I have been working with a particular team member that I have to try and who does a lot of the training and so on with franchisees to reframe what she sees as training. And very much aligned with what you're talking about, with it being about the embedding and the learning. I'm actually really struggling to get her to see it. She's really struggling to understand what I mean and how important that is. So her attitude is constantly, well, I've done the training. They should know how to do it now. And we see exactly the same outcomes as you're talking about, is some embrace it, but the vast
Yeah.
majority do not. And I just wondered what your thoughts were. I mean, I don't know anything about your ongoing learning program or anything in any detail, but is this something that would be appropriate for someone like her? Is there any thoughts, any guidance, any advice as how I can help her to be more understanding of what I'm driving her towards?
So yeah, what I probably suggest you do is download that activity kit and book an appointment. We'll have a chat. That's probably because you've actually already identified a priority there, so we can kind of jump straight in. But so the QR code there, because we probably haven't. It's a long answer. It's not as it's not as simple to answer as some of the other questions. But I'd love to have a chat with you about it, and we can kind of work out how best to approach that.
Well, Jan, thank you so much. That was so much information. I loved celebrating activity that is completed over an outcome. I really, really loved that. So excellent.